we're going to welcome to the stage two folks that, well, in one case, somebody that I've known now for almost 20 years, and she started off here at the Missouri Valley Conference. She is now the commissioner of the America East Conference in Boston, schools like Vermont, Albany, and my alma mater, graduate alma mater, Binghamton University. Please welcome to the stage, Amy Huchthausen. And with Amy, we have from SME, Ed O'Hara, Chief Creative Officer and President. We'll let you take it away. Thank you.
Amy?
Let's roll.
Can you guys hear me? We're good?
So you might wonder why college commissioners on a stage with a branding agency, but we, several years ago, the America East Conference went through a process of rebranding ourselves, not unlike a lot of properties do, and the agency we selected was SME. If you want to jump to a couple. Yep. A few things about the conference, as Pat said. We're in the Northeast. Our headquarters are in Boston, but we generally cover the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. We have 9 schools. 8 of the 9 are major public research institutions in the top 100 of U.S. news rankings. Our best sports, if you will, from a competitive standpoint in terms of potential to win a national championship are in men's soccer and men's and women's lacrosse. And this young woman, number 17 here on the right, I don't know how many of you, I know lacrosse is growing across the country. Not sure where it is yet here in the Midwest, but number 17 for Stony Brook, her name is Kylie Oldmiller. She'll be a senior this year, or she is a senior this year. She was a finalist last year as a junior for the Tuaraton Award, which is like the Heisman of lacrosse for men's and women's, and we've had finalists there for a few times, but she's one of the best female college lacrosse players to ever play the sport. She broke some national records last year. So just as a sort of small example of that, even though we're mid-major, we're not winning, championships and then say basketball tournament, we do have pretty nationally competitive teams.
So a little bit about SME. As Amy said, we partnered with her and the conference back in 2013 to really examine the brand, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But we're really a strategic brand development company. What we really do is win the heart, and I won't go on and on about it, but what win the heart means to us is it's a transformative philosophy that doesn't believe brands are functionally benefited. They are based on functional benefits, but rather emotional rewards, especially in the sports entertainment industry. It's what we trade on, and it's what we need to continue to think about if we want to be differentiated for our clients. We like to think that we're one of the most trusted branding firms in North America for sports entertainment and college athletics. Here's just some of our legacy and current clients. Sorry about the commercial break here. I just wanted to set the stage for who we are. And then Amy's going to take us through where we started.
So I became commissioner in the fall of 2011, and for those of you that might remember, there was a lot of tumult in the conference realignment landscape that started in the Power 5, what we now know as Power 5 conferences, but they eventually did trickle down to almost every mid-major except for the Ivy League was impacted in some way, shape, or form by conference realignment by having at least one school either be added or have them leave the conference. And we were certainly not alone in that respect. So I started in the fall of 2011. The day before my first in-person meeting with our board of presidents, I got a call that Boston University was going to be departing the league. And so we were forced to confront conference realignment, but then also take a look at what's next for us. We had 9 schools. They were our 9th school, so that would have left us with 8. And we were not in a position, I felt, as a league, and certainly me being on the job for 7 or 8 months, to really have a good grasp of what we were looking for. And at the mid-major level, the conference realignment is about the money. I can't wave a few $1 million or even a few $1,000s to a school in a rival conference to get them to join us, like it happens at the higher level. So it really is about fit and culture and brand equity, and what can you offer from a value proposition to a potential school. And we didn't have any of those answers. That's one of the reasons why I think I was hired, is because we needed to clean up our culture within the league and get on the same page.
And the other thing that happened at this time too is the conferences that had traditionally been formed around regionality it was out the window. We saw the things at the membership of the Big East and some of the other conferences. So one thing we did have going for us was that footprint really wasn't going to go crazy.
Yeah, that is a great benefit of us. And like we are pretty tight when you look at all the 32 conferences now. Our geographic footprint, I still feel pretty good about how we fit. And a lot of that ties to the regionality and the consistencies or commonalities rather among regions of the country. So that's what we were facing, and we needed to find a partner that could help us achieve these objectives so that we could then go identify an institution that would be a good fit for us and sort of backfill that ninth spot. And so these are the things we were looking for. Help us define our values and attributes, stand apart regionally and nationally, but mostly regionally. The Northeast marketplace is very cluttered in a lot of different ways. Pro sports dominate the Northeast like anything and nowhere else in the country, so you're battling those things. And then there's just a lot of colleges and universities in the Northeast. They're not all Division I. There are hundreds of Division III universities just within a 1-hour drive of Boston alone. So you're fighting for a lot of airspace. So we need to at least stand apart from our peer conferences, the Patriot League. The Ivy League has their own brand. They're in our peer set, Colonial and others. And really focus on the last two, how can we, once we get this all figured out, how can we actually connect that to our audiences and do it, as Ed said, start to create or reestablish an emotional connection back to the league.
So given the backdrop of what Amy just articulated, the need to rebrand became pretty evident. And what happened was Amy didn't want to bite the whole piece of steak. She took a taste, and we did a research project that really, she wanted to measure the equity, the brand equity in the hearts and minds of student athletes, recruits, even membership, presidents, all the stakeholders involved. And that goal was to raise awareness, raise esteem, increase recruitment to the schools, and really build a brand that could not only be relevant to the future students, but stay relevant to graduates and alumni and the media and everybody around in the communities that these member schools played in. So it became a big moment for the conference, probably the most historic moment relative to the brand ever. So that became the reason to do it. Amy, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was just say, I think probably all brands, regardless of their properties, how big or small, focus on the stakeholders. But for us, that was particularly important. I'm under no illusion about where we stand in the pecking order of college athletics, or where we stand in the Northeast, given all of the other sort of entertainment opportunities and sports opportunities that people have. And so our best brand ambassadors, as Ed sort of helped us put this together, was the people that are already connected to the league. And that's why it was so important for us to galvanize our stakeholders, because they were fragmented. For lots of different reasons that we'll get into, but there wasn't a strong belief that the America East Conference was a great brand. And that's coming from even people who are working and coaching at our schools. And that's obviously a problem.
Yeah. So the first step, as I mentioned earlier, was to really conduct a qualitative research study, IDIs, focus groups. Really, let's just have conversations about what the AEC is, what it stands for, what its values are, do those values align with you, and really start to anticipate the road to success. We spoke to everybody. We spoke to conference leadership, the member school presidents, athletic directors, SWAs, FARs, coaches, media partners, sponsors, competitive student athletes and their families, current students, social media, through social media and other ways. And it really became pretty evident pretty fast that the findings were exactly in line with Amy's hunch about where the brand needed to go. So the learnings were that we needed to evolve from an unrefined, undefined brand message to a clearly articulated mission built around the core values of the complete student athlete. Now, the conference didn't even have a set of articulated values before this process, so this really helped define who they were almost like from a brand belief standpoint. This is what we believe in, and that's an important step because it provides you not only with definition and identity, but it also provides you with a criteria to measure who you're going to partner with, how you discipline a student who acted inappropriately. It gives you a set of guidelines to move the brand forward.
Can I add one thing, Ed?
Yeah.
One of the comments that bothered me from the start, before which is drove or motivated this exercise, was we have in the America East, we've got 4 schools that play FCS football. They play football in the Colonial Athletic Association, which is obviously not the America East. We have 4 schools that sponsor men's ice hockey at a very high level in terms of competing for national championships. That obviously not is in the America East. So the first thing that came out of the mouths of people, whether they were external to the league or internal to the league as well, what is the America East or who is the America East? Well, we don't have football or ice hockey. Those are the first thing out of their mouth. And in terms of having a clear or unclear, in this case, brand message, you don't want someone attributing what you don't have as the first thing that they instinctively think about your conference. And so that was really crystallized in the research.
You've given up control of your own brand message at that point.
Exactly.
So the second big finding is we need to evolve from a conference perceived as a lower mid-tier basketball conference to a conference perceived as one that balances athletic performance with academic integrity. I can tell you I've worked with many conferences, Pac-12, ACC, a lot of mid-majors. Every school says this, every conference says this, very few activate it. AEC is one that believed in it and has done an incredible job with it. So that was a very critical thing to not only say it, articulate it, but then walk the talk. So the third point was we needed to evolve from a brand that the identity that elicits feelings of indifference, which you alluded to a little bit, or incorrectness, to an identity that represents the unique values of the conference and inspires a new generation of student athletes. And that last part for me was critical because it was a game changer for us in any identity or brand building exercise we had ever done to date for a conference. So Amy, do you want to add something to this?
Yeah, and this one really hit home personally because when we first started to work with SME, they threw their whole deck at us in terms of what services they could provide to the conference. And at the time, and we don't have it because it was so awful, which makes me look pretty silly now, but I wasn't convinced that we needed a new mark. I knew we needed a new message and sort of the guts behind everything. I wasn't sure we needed a new external mark until this research finding came through. And the worst thing, it's even, you'd rather almost be hated than just indifferent. That is like a terrible feeling, both personally and as a conference and as a brand. So once the research, and this is why doing the research on this stuff, which sometimes might seem obvious, but is really, really critical to this process. Once that finding came through, then we started to move forward on, all right, we needed a mark that people can actually feel connected to and have an emotion.
Yeah, and something we even talked about leading up to this presentation is the need to do ongoing research to measure your brand in the marketplace. Are the things you said 5 years ago still relevant? Are your members using them? How do the media perceive you? So it's an ongoing, I don't think a brand should do, hey, we did the research when we rebranded. It has to be a living, breathing, ongoing process. The fourth was evolved from a conference competing solely on athletic performance to a conference that shifts the barometer of what success looks like for a conference. And that's where the academic piece came in, the community piece came in, which Amy will go through in more detail a little later. So the strategy became pretty simple at this point. After all we heard, thank you, audiences, they told us the way to go. The strategy became to challenge public perception of what success means for a collegiate conference by championing the development of the complete student athlete. Athlete centricism, what it means to their life from an academic standpoint, from an academic and athletic standpoint rather, to a community outreach and support standpoint.
And so where we ended up was, as Ed said, the academic achievement, leadership, and athletics. Those are not unique to the America East Conference. Unfortunately, we don't own those, can't trademark it. But it really was two things in my mind: putting them into a narrative that made sense, and we'll get into what the 3 pillars means and how we use that. But it really then became incumbent on us and our member institutions to be disciplined in activating the implementation plans and strategies that we worked on with SME. Because just as Ed said, you can have any agency go through this process, but if you just put it on the shelf and say, I feel really good that you've got this like cool, sexy logo, but you don't do anything else around it, the chances of success are pretty slim. Right. And so that's where we really changed. This helped guide our internal communications staffing. You know, I changed staffing positions around so that we could better activate around this 3 pillars: brand and message.
So briefly on audiences, I spoke here last year on Gen Z, so I'm not going to go too deep, but we had to know and believe and agree who we were talking to with the new brand. And again, I don't want to over-compliment Amy, but she was one of the first. She was one of the first. I mean, this is back in 2012, 13. This cohort hadn't even been named yet. We were still calling them millennials, and she got that these students and student athletes are coming into our member schools, joining our conference, competing for scholarships, for wins, for championships, on and off the field. We have to know who they are. And it was we knew also at the time it was a nexus in terms of a different shift from millennial to something new. Because these younger folks, these young kids, these 17-year-olds were quite different than what we had studied prior. So Gen Z is the audience, and everybody, we're now finally, hallelujah, we're studying Gen Z in the halls of marketing. I'm sick and tired of hearing about millennials. It's not over, but if we're looking at this kind of young audience, this is who we need to speak about. So born after 1995, this is a little old now, so they've just graduated college and more like 21, 22. They're actually going to start earning some money now, which is good because I got 2 of them at home. 26% of the population, 82 million strong and growing, and their buying power is now 65 billion. And again, as I said, this is mostly my money that they're spending because they haven't earned money yet. So can't wait till they get to work. And a quick look at what's different between them. You know, Gen Zs grew up with social media. You know, they're on. You know, in fact, there's a book out now. I was telling Amy about the brain damage that's being caused by smartphones. And it's mostly these kids, if they don't change their behaviors, they're in trouble going forward. But where they grew up with social media, millennials grew up with www. YouTube is their search engine. Google is millennials. Gen Z are lookers because they're ADD. They're challenged in terms of attention, where millennials were still readers. Gen Z are entrepreneurs, where millennials are career seekers. And there's the evidentiary reason for that is they went through the Great Recession. They saw a father lose a job or a brother or sister return from college because they couldn't find a job. So the American dream for them isn't, I'm going to go for that and have the white picket fence. They might want to try something else. They're 5 screens versus 3 screens, and they're realists versus optimists for the same reasons I alluded to earlier. Their behaviors as marketers, we need to know, and branders, we need to know how this cohort consumes media. And what their behaviors are for that. So they're very socially conscious. They have a strong belief in doing good, and they believe that the brands that they invest in should be doing good. And Amy, you can get into some of the things you're doing in a few. You know, the 7-8 second attention span, we need to be mindful of that when we're giving them messages. They're not going to read 750 words. They're the Instagram culture. Give me a picture and a caption, I'm done. They are constantly connecting and sharing. Gathering community is what my 21-year-old calls it. It's gathering community. Digital natives and visual communicators, you know, memes, you know, emojis, all those stuff we need to infuse into our marketing and branding. How to engage them, bite-sized content, visually impactful ways, experiences that they can socialize. They're not lazy. They want to be out there living life. Involve them in everything you do. Let them customize their education. You know, this is a culture that grew up preference setting. So let them preference set with their education and their athletic experiences. Do good things in your community. And the most important thing is publicize them, market them. Let the world know you're doing good things. The old generations would do a good thing, have a dinner with a bunch of silver hairs and never tell the world. Do it. I think it becomes an active social experience if we activate the foundation work we're doing in the community. And then encourage their entrepreneurial spirit. This group is super creative. They've been given the tools of technology to be creative at their fingertips. We need to let them do that when they engage with our brands. Just a smattering of their apps, the most popular ones that they use. And I set this up for a reason, which we'll get through later. But Amy, you want to talk about the platform?
Yeah, so in working with Ed and understanding those audiences as a backdrop and context, this was our tagline, the complete student athlete, in the sense that, as he just talked about, they don't want to be identified. Well, let me stop for a second. One of the reasons why we focus so heavily on and tried to shift our internal focus so heavily on the Gen Z and whatever comes next is because of the research findings that showed all of these sort of apathetic or indifferent indifferent attitudes. Not that you don't want to try to capture them, but our biggest opportunity for growth are those people that are coming into our schools. And because we're in higher education and people graduate, there's always going to be a constant inflow of students, generally and prospective student athletes. So that's why it was important for us to sort of take the mindset of let's get out in front of this. We'll try to keep these other people, the silver hairs as you call them, but we'll hopefully capture them. But if we don't, it's more important to focus on the inflow than the people that are already sort of sitting around and sitting there. So the tagline about the complete student athlete, very intentional around the 3 pillars. We don't want them to be known, and they don't want to be known just as an athlete. They don't want to be known just as a student. They don't want to be known just for what they're doing in the community. And so that's where we try to put this all together and capture the entire student athlete experience. Here's just a visual representation of that with the new mark that SME designed. Certainly it was intentional to a certain extent to keep the look, and he's the creative, so he could talk a little bit more about that. But certainly we're able to capture the 3 pillars in our actual mark, which we weren't. A lot of the marks we looked at weren't able to do that. Right. But one of the reasons why I think we settled on this was because we could very clearly identify 3 pillars within the mark.
And this is why what I said earlier is so true. When I tell you that America East walked the talk, not only do they believe in the 3 pillars so much that their platform suggests it and expresses it, but built into the logo are the 3 pillars. So they're kind of forever. And just by the way, on the design side, they form an abstract E for America East, so let's not forget that one. So to the logo itself, this is where it kind of all comes around. We wanted to design a logo that looked like an app. And not only did it appeal to the generation and the target audience that we were hoping to attract, but it also was strategically in line with needing to stand apart. What are we going to do to stand apart? We did not want to create another mark. We've all seen the college marks. The bold square serifs, 3 outlines, a drop shadow, and it looks like everything else that's out there. We said, no, we're going to stand apart through the identity, and we're going to create an identity that has super young personality, fresh new colors, none of the drop shadow outlines that you see typically. We have a font that's lowercase, so it's approachable, it's casual, it feels fun. Notice conference is in the capital letters, which feels a little more official. That part should be more official. So the overall effect is very cool, and I would put it up against any conference identity out there and say, which one stands apart? America East. And further, we wanted to take a lesson from professional leagues where, let the color of the school, let the school member embrace the color, present the conference color in their colors. So they own it more. They're more likely to take it on rather than, I've seen mandates from conferences, no, you must use our black and silver. Well, we have to spend extra money on that because we don't have that in our licensing or in our manufacturing. So we wanted to do that, and this also elicited much more acceptance and use of the marks. We have a video that's not working, sorry. So we just wanted the next few slides are just how now the new brand worked in some sample ads, some sample social. I did want to speak to, from an identity and brand look tools kit, we did build these rising beams that are very much a background element, but they really connote this rising up and this sense of achievement and reaching for a high goal. They're secondary to the logo, obviously, but they are a nice kind of pattern that we can infuse where necessary. You've probably noticed them throughout this deck.
So I'll take a pause. We redesigned our website, and I just got the 5-minute mark from Patrick. So we redesigned our website this summer and launched it. And when we did the new logo back in 2013, we also had a redesigned website then, and we focused very heavily on what do you call them? The lines. I call them the lines.
The lines.
Yeah. The other sort of contextual things around the mark. And given where websites and, optimization and all of those things have come, we wanted to do a little cleaner look this time, so the white background. But what we really wanted to focus on with this next iteration of our website was telling the 3-pillar story. And so I think we've done a pretty good job on social media with telling the 3-pillar story, but our website still was the traditional old, here's your cross-country performers of the week, here's your, men's soccer player of the week as the main story on your website. And if you're trying to tell the brand, that's really important information, but that's, in my view, sort of the traditional sports information data that the people that want to know that already do.
And every collegiate
every collegiate is who won the basketball game last night. That's taking up the major real estate on your website. And for us, we're so focused on the brand, we wanted to tell, that wasn't showing our brand. We had the logo up there, and that might tell it, but our main headline story in terms of that front site did not tell the 3-pillar story. And so that was a big motivation to the redesign of our website. So now we have these images. They don't change every day. They don't change just because we have, a volleyball match last night and have that as the lead story. These are static images of our 3 pillars, student athletes in athletics, academics, and community things. And we have our sort of position statement right on there along with the school's mark. So it's very intentional. So far, it's too early to tell how fans have reacted to it, but I think what we'll find is they can find scores anywhere. They're going to Twitter, Facebook, wherever to get the score. They're going to their school site.
They're probably going here last to find the scores.
Yeah. So we wanted to start to pivot this into a brand site instead of a sports information site.
Some other examples, and then I know we're running out of time here, but I just want to say, again, so important with the 3 pillars that the hashtag 3 pillars has been widely successful and in use. And briefly on the future, my thought on the future conference branding is to continue to study the ever-changing generation that is entering these schools and competing and getting recruited. If we don't study them constantly, we fall short of missing the mark and not appealing to them.
Yeah, and from my perspective, it's doing the follow-up research. We're almost 5 years in next year, and so it'll probably be incumbent on us to see if we've hit those mark and those 4 objectives that we showed earlier, and just to continue to be sort of nimble with the distribution. We heard that from at least Wasserman, probably other people before that today. But you have to have, in order to, as the distribution becomes more fragmented, if you don't have a strong brand, people are not going to find you. And so that's hopefully the work we've done in the last few years have helped position us in that way.
Thank you, everyone.
Does anybody have any questions for Amy or Ed? Branding questions for Amy or Ed? Question back here from Tom.
When you're talking about rebranding to make your message more bite-sized and navigated, it's kind of appealing to Generation Z, more incoming students or current athletes, does that conflict at all with marketing to older generations that might be donors or parents of kids pushing their...
Yeah. It does, but I think we have to make a decision of who, as Amy alluded to earlier, who the core is. If I happen to have silver hair, so if I am a donor or maybe a premium seat buyer at one of the college, venues, personally, if we're appealing to that student athlete, I'm in. It's not about me, it's about developing them. So it does conflict, and what we didn't talk about is we do have cross-generational messaging, but the center still is that student athlete, that incoming student athlete. Amy, would you agree?
Yeah, and for a conference, I guess on both the positive and the negative, I'm not trying to recruit donors. I'm trying to recruit sponsors who are trying to get college students. The campuses have the challenge, I think, more than a conference does in balancing an older demographic with the younger demographic. So we want to be complementary to that, but that's one of the big reasons why that wasn't the motivating factor for our target audience.
Well, listen, again, thanks to Commissioner Amy Huchthausen and President and Chief Creative Officer at SME, Ed O'Hara, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Doctor. Appreciate it.